Seems like everyone's a little busy on Friday, which is fine. So I'm going to be presenting to the world via YouTube. So we're on day five. Day five. And just a quick recap. If we take a look over here, this is an overview of level one of my method on the left side. There are all of the concepts in the order that I would present them. On the right side, there are the... Oh. Hello? Hey. Looks like everyone's busy on Friday. So it's just going to be you and me, it looks like, for now, unless anyone joins in. But that would be cool if you get to ask me questions. Or you can turn off your camera. I don't care. Yeah. So I'm gonna go through this. This is just the recap really quick. So um, on the left side of this sheet, if I didn't give you the sheet, just let me know. I'll send it over. We've got the concepts in the order that I would typically present them. And on the right side of the sheet, this is the concepts divided by the categories: the feel, hear, read, create, and play, organized in, you could say, order of difficulty. And so, it's a quick recap when I actually get into the concepts. And so, feel on this is unit 9, sorry, of level 1. And so this is when I would go and introduce articulation under feel. And articulation is something, again, that I feel is more related to how the body moves. And you see a little bit of rulers on the right, because to me, when it comes to piano, articulation is a lot more about note length than, if you're playing like a string instrument or something. There are weird things you can do, weird movements, like you can tap with the bow, or you can play somewhere else on the strings. And so articulation is a little bit more diverse on another instrument. Articulation on piano um, tends to be more like, it's all those little symbols that you see, but the end result is usually louder, softer, shorter, or longer. And so staccato, for example, is just, instead of, that, then we're doing shorter. Well, how short? And so that leads me to this second point. One of the ways that I teach the different kinds of staccato, there's different approaches to getting staccato. And so three different ways that I like to teach getting staccato are with like swiping or plucking. And so you're going to see this like click, this backward plucking kind of motion. And that's really good for very short sounds, and it's also good for when we get into repeated notes. That's the kind of motion that you're most likely going to want. The other kind of staccato, there's two other kinds of staccato. One of them is more of like a tap, and so that's going to be a bigger motion usually. You can do it with just the fingers, but it's a little bit more difficult. This is the way that I think is most typically taught, which is like the hot stove option. Ah, it's hot. Ah. Now, this tends to create a little bit more of a plotty staccato, like a longer staccato than the plucking. And then there's also the flicking staccato, which is more of just like, I like to think of it as just releasing the finger actively. So when I was first taught it, I was taught it like this, but what I like to think of it is more like, it's good for like classical articulation. So if you're doing a scale, and in classical music, we like to have that non-legato kind of sound. So notice that my fingers are very quickly, it's almost like they're hopping on the keys. All right, and so that can be good for training for classical articulation. Then, so accents. It is if you do see articulation, if you do see accents as in the articulation category, then this is. The big point I want to get across here is it's kind of similar to what we went over with dynamics, which is just to make sure that we release the wrist after. So if we had an accent out of nowhere, we need to make sure that there's a release after that. That way, don't hold that tension. Let me show you actually. So what could happen is this. Very, very, very tense. So we want to do the opposite. Big release. Big release when we get to that accent. Of course, I've been showing you through a 5-finger scale and a 5-note scale, or you could say pentascale. You could do this in improv, though. You can do it in songs they know, as always. So let's say, all right, I want you to do black keys. Let's use one of the scales that we've been practicing on. Let's do black keys only, and I want you to, while you're playing, we're gonna do the 3 different kinds of staccato. You're gonna do some that are plucked, you're gonna do some that are flicked, and you're gonna do some that are tapped. And you could just do some regular notes too. Right? So fun to mix it up. And at this point, yeah, I would do a symbols overview. So just, you can introduce as many symbols as you like. Think of it more of like you're giving them a sandbox to play in. So, hey, there's all these different kinds of symbols with articulation. There's a dot. That's cool. There's a accent that goes like this. Hey, that's cool. There's an accent that goes like this. It's on its side. Hey, what's the difference? It opens up a fun conversation. What's the difference between those accents? And all of the different kinds. It's fun to just have them, give them different things to draw to. So, moving on. So, metric counting. So far we've done other kinds of counting for notes. We've done I've introduced top edge, or if you are mixing this in with another method, this is, after you introduced counting, per note. So 1, 1, 1, 2 for quarter, half note. Metric counting is just when you are counting to the bar, to the measure, instead of to each separate note. And before I do it through reading, I like to do it through improvising by ear kind of thing. And so I'll have the student count. Let's say we're in 4/4. I'll say or 4 whatever, right? It could be 4/8, 4/16. Doesn't matter what the bottom number is because it's just by ear. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. And while they're counting, we're going to start to improvise using any of those scales that we know. Let's do whole tone scale now. And you can, and I'd recommend starting simple to complex. And so let's just count and play on beat 1. We're only going to play a note on beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Now, to make it more complex, you might start saying, all right, now we're going to play a note on beat 1 and beat 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. now let's play a note on every single beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Gets them to have to think a little bit faster. And then you can start to say, all right, now let's mix it up a little bit. Let's try a couple of different combinations. I want you to play 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now try the opposite. Let's go 1, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now you get to change on every single measure. You decide. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, did you also know that you can play in between the beat? You can play faster notes as long as the counting doesn't change. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And so if they can get to that level of complexity, that would be really fun. Now, the flip side of that is it's fun to also listen to a song they know and count along, and you might have to just tell them what the meter is. It might be hard at this level to identify if a song is in 3/4 or 4/4. So there's that too. And remember, that's all through just listening. So now, Unit 9, the read concept is really simple. It's just 8VA, 15MA. And so, why? Because it's not that hard to, if all we've been doing so far, if we keep the notation the same as what we've been doing, this is just one little extra thing. And I like the idea of introducing 8VA a little bit sooner, because it stresses the importance of it, whereas like a lot of methods wait longer to introduce it, and the end result is that it gets kind of ignored. The student tends to think that it's not as important. So it creates a big sound. It timing, what did I write that here? Oh yeah, so it creates a big sound, and one of the things that you'll have to practice is getting there on time. So 8VA there's always the problem of 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If that was our example, student might go 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're gonna want to address that from the start. You might even just do hop back and forth, see if they can get there on very quickly, so that way it doesn't bother them in the future. If you are reading sheet music, you might want to highlight it. So undo, lots of undos. So we've got let's put 4 lines in here. 3, 4, and let's draw just a bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're gonna repeat that. And just for the sake of time, we're going to assume those have stems. And let's say that's C. And notice no bar line still, no measures, it's just open. The less to focus on, the better, so that we can focus more on the 8VA or 15MA. 8VA. And then now, of course, you can decide. The only downside to this is that, well, it's because of this kind of notation. Well, where do they start? So, I guess technically, yeah. Sorry. So it would be more like redo. So you'd have to do. You wouldn't be able to start with 8VA in this case because there is no set starting spot. You'd have to go 8VA over here. So whatever you are playing, wherever you are playing, then you have to go an octave higher. And so, okay, let's say I started on this C. That means that the next C I have to place here. Okay, and now if the student's not getting it, of course you can just highlight, highlight the 8VA. Colors are a little bit more attractive than just pencils. And then now the next thing, which actually kind of coincides with another concept that I'm going to introduce soon, is to take a piece that doesn't have 8VA or 15MA and let the student add an 8VA in. If they own that octave higher or 2 octaves higher, if they own that choice, they're going to pay attention to it more. And so, rather than somebody else telling them to do it. And then that might get them to pay more attention to it in the future, because then they'll see the significance of it. They'll be like, oh, well, when I did it, it was important. So it must be important when somebody else did it. So let them draw that 8VA in. Okay, so as promised, this is the next concept, which very much coincides with what I was just saying. So again, there's some overlap in concepts here. That one was more tied to reading, though. This one is more tied to the creative stuff. And so, and honestly, I usually introduce this more in the context of reading, but you can, there's ways to introduce it outside the context of reading also. And so you can just do it if you have like a chord chart or something with just lyrics, you can add in these symbols with the chord chart. Or if you are just like, if you just made your own notes, or even if you just had a recording or something to work with, you can say at 30 seconds in the recording, we're going to do a crescendo or whatever. And so the whole idea here is owning the creative choices. And this is like the first step towards interpretation, really. And so, it's not interpretation's usually reserved for like high level musicians, and it doesn't have to be. It can be at lower levels that they do this. And so a great way to do this, to introduce this, would be to play something very plainly for the student. So let's say I'm doing like Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then what are the things that the student can add at this level? Well, we've already taught them dynamics, so we've taught them a lot of different dynamics. We've taught them everything from pianissimo to fortissimo and in between, and crescendo, decrescendo, all that stuff. And so I might ask the student, I'll start open-ended. I always start open-ended because and then if they have trouble answering, I'll start to get more specific. Do you want to add any dynamics in there? Do you want to play that? Should I play this louder or softer? This feels like Mary Had a Little Lamb. It should be gentle. Let's play softer. I like that choice. Okay. Do you want to get louder at any point in there? No, I like it all the way soft. Okay, that's fine. So start to ask them these questions and get them involved. And then maybe you can suggest some things too. Just make it a conversation. Articulation, we went over articulation, note length, and stuff like that. Do you want to accent any note? Do you want to make any note shorter? Well, let's see. Hey, it's fun to have a staccato there when you have the repeated notes, like you're bouncing. It's a happy little lamb. So they're jumping up and down on the key there. So, let them add some of these things, and you'd be surprised at how much they can come up with once they start to pay attention to that. Tempo, beats per minute, you can let them decide, and so set up, if they're comfortable. We've introduced the metronome at this point. We've introduced working with the metronome, so they understand that. And so turn on a metronome and say, let's set the speed. All right. setting on one. Okay, let's try 160. Yeah, that feels like too rushed. How about we slow it down, and then they might turn it down 100. That feels a little better. You can ask them about pedal. Another thing that we've introduced. Think about all these things that we've introduced so far in the method. All these things you can ask them about and see what their opinion is. In the future, we haven't gone over this, but when you start to get later in the level, these are things you'll go over: ritornando, accelerando, I never knew the pronunciation of and fermata. These are things that you can introduce later, or if you feel so inclined, you can introduce at this level too. So, the play concept for Unit 9 is, and we've gone over this a bunch of times, the way I like to do it is solfege and numbers, but again, if the student is already familiar with other systems, then it might be weird to transition over to those other systems. And so, and what about these? It's about the writing of them. And so this kind of pertains a little bit more to sheet music too. Although again, you can do it with simpler forms of notation also. Good as a homework assignment because again, it breaks up their practice. It gives them time to digest what they have been playing. So, if they were practicing over and over and over again, you know what? Their brain's going to get tired of doing that. Give them a chance to write something. And then while they're writing, they're going to be processing what they were playing before so that when they go back to it, it feels a little bit more secure. So I say, but Chris, so so the problem here is I know a lot of teachers, what they'll see is this atrocity where they bring in sheet music and they've got letters written on every single note on the page, and letters or numbers or something. The page is just littered with it, and to that I say, if you did that on every single piece, every single note, yeah, that's probably going to be a problem. But if it's every once in a while, just as like a homework assignment, then it can be still, it can be really nice. It's sort of my way of like a compromise, and so like you might get like theory books that tell you to write letters in. There's theory books where like the whole page is just letter naming, for example, and so it's my way of saying like, hey, well, instead of doing this in a theory book, let's do this in the piece that you're playing, and so it's a compromise really. So, all right, let's go into Unit 10, body language. And you'll see why there's a turtle there with a very judgmental expression. And so what I like to go back to every once in a while is the wheel of emotion, which I will pull up here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, so share my screen. Every once in a while, so a lot of kids, no matter the age, have trouble describing their emotions, and so you might find various scenarios where you go back to this kind of wheel just to help them understand what they're feeling, and so I'll show this wheel, and I'll say in this particular case, under feel, which is about the way we move and stuff like that, I'll start by saying something like, all right, let's pick an emotion. And so they'll go around the wheel and say, I want to do a happy. Or you can go even further and say, I want to feel confident. Okay, so let's do confident. And we'll back up. Yeah, if you want to find this, you can just go wheels of emotions on Google, and there's a whole bunch that comes up. And so then after you pick that emotion, confident, okay, create a scene, act it out with them. You could even give them words today to say or something. And so what's the situation where you're feeling confident? We just won a spelling contest. And so I'm feeling confident. So how do you act when you won that spelling contest? So like, you might say like, let's get away from the piano for a second. You just won that you just won that spelling contest. How do you feel? Yes. All right. So notice I'm going to walk away. I'm going to say my chest is held high. I'm like smiling. I'm proud. And so there was initial bolt of like energy. I had this quick motion and I was nice and tall. I'm looking upwards. And so it's affecting my body language. It's affecting the way that I move when I authentically feel that way. And so what does that mean for when we play? Let me get back to these two. I should have put this in a different order, but why? So the feeling, like I said, the feeling affects the movement of your body, and the movement of your body affects the sound. And so, and then it kind of like snowball effects, because then the sound makes you feel more that way, and so like you go into a loop. And so where you were playing a simple C major scale, this 5-finger scale before. Right? The way that I was just playing that was very plain. If I were to do that confidently, well, let's think about how I moved, how I felt when I was confident. My chest was held high. I moved a little bit more like jolty because I was like excited. What happened? So I played a little bit louder. I accented a couple of notes here and there. And it wasn't a gigantic difference. It was subtle. And that's the beauty about adding emotional influences. It's not like this gigantic change. Now, that being said, let's talk about these two little things. Okay, the turtle. The turtle, what I mean by this is the type of student, this is the type of student that is super shy, and so especially you might get this with like, especially these two things actually, both of these, you might get these two things when the student is like in middle school or something, going through a lot of social influence and all of that, and so the turtle is the shy one, the one that's like, ooh, wait, I don't want to. Emotions, ew. And so they're going to go into their shell, and it's going to be hard to convince them to come out. And so I was like this when I was a kid, and one of my teachers said it was about acting. I was on stage, and they wanted me to come out of my shell a little bit and act a little bit more. And so what they would say is, if you think you're doing it, if you think you're acting 100%, you're not doing it enough. And so for those students, say, I want you to overdo it. I want you to give me 200% emotion acting. And when they give 200%, that's more like, it'll be like somebody else's 70%. And so you have to really over ask of those students. Now you have, on the flip side, you have the jokester. So someone, again, who's uncomfortable with their emotions, what they might do is they might way overact and be silly and goofy with it. And to those students, let them go through their feelings, let them do it. If we, this thing, so that if I did what I was just asking, you might go, yeah, that's confident. Okay, I understand. I get it. That was funny. Now let's see if you could dial it back a little bit. And so, have fun with them, enjoy it, laugh with them, even if you're actually bothered by it. And then say, all right, now let's see, you're at 200. Can we bring it back to, let's bring it back to 100. And then they might give you what you want. So, all right, body language. Oh, and of course, body language. I should have said body language / facial expression, because it does, the facial expression does help too, but we'll get we got to move on. So, all right. So the next thing here, move this back actually. All right, here, no symbol rhythm dictation. So before we start to make the connection. This is something I learned from recording programs like GarageBand and Logic Pro, which is why you see all these like knobs here. And so, and I thought it was like, hey, you know what? This is a cool idea of how to think about rhythm. We should incorporate this into piano lessons. And so, the idea here is that we're going to be using either notches or metric counts. I'll show you what I mean in a second. And then we're gonna, in order to notate the rhythm, instead of using symbols, we're gonna use bars, and that's something that MIDI would do. If you record a note into like GarageBand, you'll see that the note comes as a bar to literally show you how long that note lasted. And then later, you can translate that to symbols. So it might look something like this. Oop, shared the same screen. Whiteboard, there we go. So when we are, and again, this is by ear. So let's say, metric counting. We'll do metric counting. 1, and, oops, and 2, and 3, and 4, and you can do this over 2 measures, 1 measure, doesn't, however much you think your student can handle. And then, now, it's kind of like rhythmic dictation, right? So I'm going to play something for you, or you can even, if you want, you can do it with let's do it with a song. Okay, so let's do, like, for example, Here Comes the Sun. So it goes, um, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay, so that's just the first measure. Instead of, I left out the last note. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, okay. And so we can go even slower. Hey, there was no note on 1 and, so we're going to leave that open. And then you can do arrow, or you can do just a line. 1 and 2. Oh, there was a new note on and. 2 and 3 and lasted all the way till there. And then there was a new note on 4, which lasted all the way through and. And so this is what your notation would end up looking like, something like this. Then you can just have them play this on a single note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this will be not too hard, because so far, you remember in one of our the last time what we went over was metric counting, and we practiced improvising with that metric counting, so they're already used to this idea of playing to what they're counting with. Now we're just I introduced the end. You don't have to do the end. You could just do without the end. So I should, yeah. So you can just do 1, 2, 3, 4. But if it's not really too hard to introduce the ends with this particular exercise, but you get the idea. And then after you do this, I should have done something with numbers only. Well, okay, so the ands can come later. In fact, they should. Yeah, subdivisions get talked about later. I don't know why I did subdivisions, but the point is you take this, you write out the counting, and then you put the bar, you make the arrows to go with it, and then after that, that's when you can translate it, you could say, to regular notation. So again, I should have introduced this later, but let's just assume this is a little later in the method. And so, like, okay, well, what kind of note? Let's say this is, what's the time signature? Let's call this 4/4. And so that means the quarter note gets the beat, which means that, hey, this only lasted half a beat, so what note gets half a beat? An eighth note. And so you draw an eighth note. And I'd probably, if there were 2 eighth notes together, I wouldn't go straight to connecting them like this. I would start by drawing them separately. everything separately. And then if there happens to be two eighth notes together, after I would say, hey, you know what? Cool, fun fact, you can connect these two. But like I said, at this level, I made a mistake. I shouldn't. No ands. No ands. So, all right. And then, okay, and then symbols last. If you wanted to do Here Comes the Sun with just metric counting, just double the speed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the same rhythm, but instead of going 1 and 2, and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can make it work. Here, no symbol. Oh, we just did this. 4 lines, broken and blocked. So we're just kind of like reviewing this concept here, and it's still, we're sticking to steps and skips. I know it's been a few times, but I wanted to emphasize that point because the steps and skips are just so important to, even when you get to like really advanced music, and where the notes are all over the place. The thing I still notice the most is the steps and the skips and the repeated notes. And so, even if you've got a passage that is like, something like this, like arpeggio, whatever it is, right? I'm not noticing all of those notes. I'm noticing, all right, this one starts on C. The next one is a step up. The next one's a step up. And so it all comes, a lot of the time when I'm reading, it comes back to like steps and skips. That's what I notice the most. That's how I make sense of a lot of what I read. And so it's so important to establish that from the beginning. Leaps and obvious patterns. Now, when it comes to leaps, when it comes to intervals that are bigger than steps and skips and repeated notes, you can introduce these, but only through. But I would try to keep it through obvious patterns. So, an example would be like, let's say we've got our 1, 2. Struggling today with this program. 3, 4. All right, so we've got this, and for sake of time, I'm not going to do stems. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So far we've got all steps. Next note I'm going to do is back here, and then back here. That's something bigger than a repeated note or a step. Repeated note, a step, or a skip. But why is it okay? It's okay because we played this note before at the beginning of our passage. And over here, we just played this. So it makes it really easy to see what these notes are. It's not like it came out of the blue. So if I did something like, I'll give you a different example. If I started off the piece or the phrase or something like that, and I went to a fifth right away, that could be a little bit more problematic, because then they're going to have to, count all the notes in between, and so like this is something that this is a concept I would kind of focus a little bit more on a little later. Like I think it's level 2 in the method, but I'll give you kind of so like when I do want to go over it, really what I just try to do is emphasize when you have an interval that is bigger than a step or a skip, out of context like this, where there's no pattern or nothing to help you recognize it, an easier way to think about it is, okay, well, how many skips and then how many steps? And so it's a skip, a skip. Oh, 2 skips up. That makes it really a little quicker to find that note. So we go. there's my note, 2 skips up. Rather than having to like look really carefully, it's easier to see skips because it's line to line to line. Steps are really small on the page, and so it's easier to see the skips first and then see the step. So, but that's another concept, so I don't want to go over that one too much. So, practice drawing. So, you can have them practice. Yeah, it's just as I said. So draw the lines out for them. Have them draw it. Something you can do also is literally just like have them copy some sheet music or copy your own examples to help them understand this better. And then with blocked, this is what I was talking about before. It's comparing versus counting distance. And so like in that example I just showed you, instead of doing bum, 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 I could have done bum, and then both notes at the same time, and that would have been, and then I could have said the same thing. Hey, let's look backwards. Is it, and you can see that it's just the notes that we played before. So, all right, create, and, yeah, we're doing nice on time. So, create level 1 left-hand patterns, and so, with these patterns, I'll go over some different patterns that are doable in a second, but it's nice to, a left-hand pattern would go something like this. Just draw and repeat, and it's something that they can improvise over or they can use for lead sheets later. Now, it's not really a pattern unless we do it in more than one spot, and so we start with 2 spots. Or you can do it 2 times in one spot. And I didn't write this down, or you can just have it be free and say, yeah, you know what, you can change whenever you want and you can go wherever you want. That's another way to introduce it where they don't have to think about it too much. So either way works, and then small range for the right hand. So this way, because the left hand pattern can be, that can be a lot to focus on, and so I would say give the student, to make their life a little easier to start, I would say give them, so if you see at the bottom of the screen, we're going to keep it to those 5 notes, for example. Or if you're doing black keys, these 4 notes, or something like that. These 3. Let's do black keys as an example. So we're going to stick to these 3 notes in your right hand. Don't play any others. And so... So that way they can really focus more on what their left hand's doing and not about their right hand. Now, I say 1 right hand note per left hand pattern, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that rhythmic improv that we talked about. You can start easy and get harder. And so it's going to be a lot to think about the left hand, so why don't we just do 1 note in the right hand? You could even make it the same note. Alright, what if we played that 1 note but on a different part of the pattern? Okay, or what if I played it after? So explore the very simple 1 note options in the right hand before you start to branch out. So here's just a couple of patterns, and let's see, I had a sheet up here. Give me a second. Okay. You can see this. These are some left-hand patterns that are fairly easy to start with. And I give like little titles to these. There's the stride bass, as, but you can just start with, and much slower too. 1, rest, 1, rest, 1, rest, Alberti bass, slowly. Might be a little bit more complicated, but then rock is very easy. You just hammer away at the same note for four in a row. You know, a pattern can be as simple as just holding for four beats. That technically is a pattern. 3, 4, 1. So you know, boogie might be a little bit more specific to the blues scale, but that's okay. Here's a waltz pattern that's really interesting, which is leaving out beat one. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This has happened in there's a Chopin piece that does this. A lot of Chopin pieces that do this actually. Take a look through Chopin waltzes and stuff like that. You'll notice there are some pieces that leave out the first note. Battle is fun. That's back and forth. Or this rhythm, which you would probably have to teach more by ear. Not something they can easily read at that level. Ballad is what I played for you before, and rock ballad or march, you can call it, is where you're just playing every other beat. And then I said anything with emphasis on 2 and 4. And so, I think of a lot of popular styles of music where you get that snare drum on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Here. And so this is an intro to that kind of music where you get that snare on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So a lot of different fun patterns, and if you want, I can send this later. And then hold on, let's do this out of the way. I'm good at computers, I swear. And so all right. And then the last thing I'm going to just really quickly go over today is the mastery checklist. I say mastery in quotation marks because a piece is never really mastered, even if you're a professional, pianist or whatever. You're never done with a piece. But when you're a beginner student, it sometimes can be nice to keep track of. It can be nice to keep track of what exactly is improving in the piece. And so I put this in. I have a PDF of this. This is another thing I could send out. So if you want it, I can send it to you. And so very simple. I give this to students. They put it in a binder and song title, whatever they're working on. The rhythms. Did they get the rhythms right? They can focus on rhythms only when they're practicing. Did they nail down all the letters? They can practice letters only. Take out the rhythms. Forget about rhythms for a second. Did they get all the fingers right? You even could do this by itself. You could just practice fingers away from the piano. Practice, take the piece, go away from the piano. Practice whatever fingers you're going to be using. Tempo. So this is something that you can't really do without the rest of these. And also one of the things that I consider to be tempo is not just how fast my students play, but also how steadily they play. And so they could get the correct rhythms. They could get a check mark for rhythms, but not get a check mark for tempo. If I see that they understand what the rhythms should be, but they have a lot of pauses in there, then they'll get a check for rhythms and they won't get a check for tempo. And so dynamics articulation, again, kind of hard to do by itself. You could if you want, you can let them improvise while following the dynamics and articulations, general articulations of the piece, but that's kind of getting far away from what the piece actually is. And then technique, I view as just are they tight? Are they incorporating all of the technique that we have talked about so far? And so, are we looking for perfect technique, are we looking for college level technique where you're really, really all the way expressive, where you're super loosey goosey? No, I just want to see that they have done everything that I've asked them to, with the expression, with the looseness of the wrist, anything that they should know at this point. And then if they have, then I'll give them a check. And this is, I view as optional. The memory, have they memorized the piece? And then if they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these, I'll give it a check for all. Memories, bonus. I should put a little star there for that. And then that's it. So again, take one of these ideas, please try it out in your own teaching. Let me know how it goes.